Hamilton 1, and we have the downtown Hudson site. My name is Connie Rosello Brown.
I'm Ryan Grabo.
I'm Lisa Rose Merritt.
Mary Kay Lancaster.
1 second. Ryan, could you start the timer? What do I do? Just return, press the mouse button.
You shouldn't have told them that. But
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, we evaluated the site last time for everybody and did it for a number of uses. And what we want to do today is reevaluate it for viable uses and also evaluate whether or not there's a chance that something like this might be profitable. So the Hudson site is downtown. It's about 2 acres. It exists in the heart of the CBD. It's close to the people mover. A people mover stop could be put there. It's in an area where light transit is proposed. It's close to the cultural district, to some entertainment venues, new office buildings, and it's not that far from the riverfront. But it's also in an area that has a lot of vacancies and a lot of buildings, and there's some safety issues. So what we looked at last time is we looked at retail, office, residential, grocery, and hospitality. And we looked at the demand and the need for these. We evaluated vacancy rates, occupancy rates, and rents. And based on our presentation and what you told us last time, we're looking more at an educational component to the site. We're looking at reviewing the residential and the grocery that we first proposed, and also more of the socio-demographic information on it.
Okay, so sociographic information. You can see from this matrix how Detroit compares to various cities, and you can see that it's on the trendy adult side, a bit in the luxury sector. So trendy adults or hipsters like to live in downtown. 60% of the downtown people are age 25 to 39, and 2/3 work in the city. They tend to be professionals with relatively high salaries. They work long hours. They enjoy the nightlife and the excitement of being in the city. The typical resident has not started a family. Families with young children are underserved in the CBD, and it seems that as your child gets older, about the time when they learn to ride a bike, you want to move out of the city. So many in this group desire a safer environment, and they also want access to groceries. Less than 6,000 people live in the central business district, but 80,000 people work there. And there are new jobs on the rise there. And again, employers are describing their employees as youthful, internet-based, excited to be in Detroit, so the trendy young adult sector. So looking at that and education use, we did a little research. That says there's 7 elementary schools. There's really 8 elementary schools within a mile and a half of our site, and they are they're private, charter, and public. One of the things about our site is also there are only 8% of the households have children. So demographically and sociographically, the school issue may not be supported, but as well, when we looked into the Detroit public schools and the charter schools in Michigan can be chartered by public universities, community colleges, local educational agencies, and intermediate school districts. Mainly in Detroit, the charters are chartered by the public school system. So together, when you look at their numbers, they're very poor. They're very poor performers. There's a handful of really good ones, but on average, for instance, the graduation rate in the Detroit public schools is at 60%, and the charters is at 62%. So we think that's a real deterrent to schools. One thing we do think is a viable option for the young people that could be having children, and also the market for the downtown workers, is a preschool in the central business district, which would be for the younger ages 3, 4, and 5.
So we present to you our development plan. The residence is at 12,000 Woodward, or 1,200 Woodward, I'm sorry. So adding to our previous formula of downtown has density, we need to add density to Detroit, being that there's only 6,000 people that live there. So our building not only joins a collection of buildings that are located in the Merchants Road District, but it's located in the heart of the Central Business District as well. And we have nearby amenities that include YMCA, there's a library, and there's a multitude of commercial buildings which people can work at as well. So we're taking a two-phase approach. The first phase dealing with the northern half, which is a smaller portion of the site, putting a first floor groceries and a residential tower above. And then the second phase would come later on.
So when we looked at the site, they were advertising the site with a $25 site rent, triple net. So we had to take a look at what does that site rent do to us instead of a purchase of the land. So we looked at if we took that and divided by a number of floors, this bottom line would be covering that site rent on per square foot basis. And then we added construction divided over 30 years at $160 a square foot to give us some value for that. And then financing at 5 and 10% is what we're seeing. So as we look at various uses, we're finding the retail's higher, the office is higher, but these were all uses that we found we really didn't have enough market to look for. Now, residential and grocery, we found that there's possibility of a viable market in the area, but we're really riding that borderline of making it viable or not. So some of the conclusions we came up with is, if you look at the single floor, we can't get the grocery or the educational to work with that site rent value. So we have to go taller. Like an office area, you go 10, 20 stories, similar to CompuWare, that looks like it has good potential to work, but we don't see the market for a speculative office added to the downtown. So we're still looking at that grocery residential and how to make that work.
So basically reiterating the fact that there are only 5 grocery stores within the area that we're looking at, which is the downtown oriented district, which would also be our pool of people we're looking at. And that the nearest grocery store to our site is 2.1 miles away, and that the smart bus probably can't get you to that grocery store. This is an excellent use for this site, but however, as you can see, based upon market rates, the average square footage for rental square footage for groceries is around $20, but our site is $25. So, of course, a single use for the site will not work. Getting into the residential, being that we do have the growth of people coming in from new jobs and people that actually work there, and our vacancy rate in this area is very low. It's under 3%. Our market analysis shows that a soft loft type construction is still preferred, which is actually on the lower end of construction costs. And our comps in the Merchant Road District show that we're at about $1.20 to $1.30 per square foot. We ruled out a live-work situation because the rental comps come back at $1 to $1.15 per square foot, which is much below our actual comps that we can get. And an attraction to this district also is that there's no new housing in the Central Business District, which could attract some people from the outlying suburbs. And so we're dealing with, based upon the previous chart, a building that is over 25 or over 20 floors of residential construction and a total construction cost of over $100 million. But in creating the 100% location for this place, we do have some obstacles to overcome, one being safety and the other one being the lack of density. Once we bring density to this area, theoretically, safety should follow. So we do have an area of threshold resistance within our district, which is at the northern end of the site. In order to break that down, we need to create density within these 2 giant vacant buildings with the site. So our development, hopefully, will support redevelopment of these older historic buildings, which in addition could provide roughly about 700 units of housing or another 1,000 people to this district.
So what we were looking at for our proposal, if we took the entire block of the site, we're looking at that northern portion, which is about 40%. So we're only looking at developing a portion of it in the first phase. When you look at that, we got about 33 floors, 32 towards housing, 1 floor towards grocery. Below we have parking that the city developed. It's already there, we don't have to pay for it. But unfortunately, when you look at the income, that means we really don't get to count that as our income. And depending on the arrangement with the city, we may or may not be able to offer that as a direct amenity to our residents. The right-hand slide is looking more at the income that we would receive from those respective square footages. So as we went through it, we had roughly about $10 million in gross income, but we were figuring we found numbers that indicated
How much is that per square foot average?
This was on a yearly basis.
Yeah, how much per square foot?
For the residential was 15 we used, for grocery 19.
$15 a square foot for residential.
Right, so we're a little on the
And what is it for office?
office we were in the low 20s.
Is one?
In the low 20s.
120.
Low
20s.
20s.
So
Low
20s.
20s. Huh?
like $21 a square foot per year. So based on that operating expense of residential, we were having trouble. When you look at it, that leaves you about $4 million to work with. Well, when you divide that over your construction cost, that gives you a capitalization rate of about 3.7%. So our understanding of the capitalization rate is you could consider if you paid for all of that and had no financing, that would be roughly your return on investment. So 3.7% is a pretty hard number to swallow. Another way to consider that is if you were to get financing on all of that, 3.7% interest rate would essentially mean you're never paying down your principal. So that looks like we have difficulty making it to occur. So that's our presentation.
So your recommendation is?
You can look at possibly seeing if the city is working to
You have a lot of money.
dealing to work with you on some things to lower that rent cost and to help subsidize some of the construction, but without
Well, you're
some
talking
assistance.
pension fund money.
This is creative finance.
Yeah.
There is pension around at 3.7%. But my question is there a market for the resident? Is there a market for the commercial office? That's the question.
There isn't.
The lowest paid rent in retail is a food store. That's the lowest paying rent. And the shops are what pay the rent. But because they do more business per square foot, that's more profitable. Their margins are much higher. The margins on a food store is somewhere between 0.5% and 1.5%. It's a very narrow margin. And margins on a ladies' ready-to-wear store could be as much as 35 to 40%. It's different. Anyway, that's these are the questions. I agree with you. It's safe. I don't think you could build anything on it today unless you get pension money, which is always possible. They might be interested in making the investment in downtown.
Right. There's been discussion about trying to shrink the city where they're pulling people from areas that they don't want to put as much support.
The city now, of course, it uses about, I guess it's 60% of it, has 139 square miles, and it uses 60 some miles, right? Something like that. There's a lot of growth within the city on a low-rise basis, which is half the cost of high-rise,
Right.
roughly. You know.
I think last time we talked about why we didn't choose the office use, and the vacancy rates were about 35% in the city, and that was sort of our main reason for not going with the office use. And then retail, there's almost no successful retail in our area, and
Well, that doesn't mean there
and the
can't be.
density
The question
is the issue there.
The question is of analyzing the demographics, finding out what the spendable is there, which you can do. It's not a lot now, but as I mentioned a number of weeks ago, the country's going to have 40% more people. We're going to have the country's going to have 150 25 million more people by the year 2050. Now this area has an opportunity to grow if they're successful in bringing industry in, so there's jobs for people, and that's the most important thing today.
The interesting demographic that I've recently heard about Detroit and the 2010 census is that what they're going to find is that the white population in Detroit has doubled as a percentage of total. And if you look at that, that's about, in the last decade, 70,000 more white people have moved into Detroit than existed in the year 2000.
Now,
And they analyze then, who are they? They're the hipsters you're talking about. So the question is, what percentage of those 70,000 people who want housing convenient to where the jobs are downtown can you grab? And it doesn't seem to me that it's, and there are people that have good professional jobs downtown. It seems like there may be a ready market. I mean, your market may be 50% of those people, assuming that in a trend where Detroit was continuing to decline in population, this segment of the population doubled. That's a significant demographic.
Growing a little bit. I mean, we looked at like if it just grew just a little bit over the next 5 years, that we need like about 280 to 350 units, and if it even started to match any of the cities, it would get bigger.
Yeah. Well, but it isn't just growth of the entire city. It's where can you direct growth? I mean, you consider that again. I'm going to keep on going back to light rail transit. This is on the transit line, and in the next 10 years, this is going to be a regional transit line going all the way to Birmingham and maybe even Pontiac. And so it's the armature of the redevelopment of the city. Now, you show me where a transit-oriented development in this place in an area that the population that can afford this thing, the office workers that are working downtown, no matter what color, what race they are, they can afford it because the jobs are going to be there for them. I think you can start to make a case for a market. If it just continues the same trend, you may have 70 to 100,000 more people that can afford to live there in the next decade. So I don't think getting your residential market, if you can keep it within the price points, is a problem. I think office is a problem right now for Detroit, and I'm wondering, a speculative office in Detroit is a problem, but what about a signature office within your complex?
well, Dan Gilbert just moved into Pete Cormanis's building, Compuware's building, and he brought 1,700 people with him. And he has 2,000 more out in the suburbs he wants to bring up. Might be a good spot for him, although they've offered him 2 others. They've offered him where the old Statler Hotel was.
The Madison building. He said he's looking at the Madison building.
But in the movement of the future of Detroit, knowing that you're going to have a driver for development in terms of infrastructure, is it reasonable to assume that you could attract in the next 5 years or so a reasonable amount of office to a location like this?
The problem with it is twofold. Number one, the cost of doing it against the interest, and secondly is the carry. Because theoretically, every 5 to 7 years, your cost, if it's vacant, your costs double. So you're always behind yourself.
You really have to get them booked into the space right from the beginning.
Now, that doesn't mean that it's not possible. It's always, somebody wants to make the investment. Look, they built the Heinz building, basically. Was designed as a vacant building. It so happened that Comerica went in there, and but it was designed by Heinz as a vacant building, as a building that would be filled by their ingenuity. It's amounts to.
But you may have some build to suit demand, you know, as this momentum continues. So that could happen. We build to a signature tenant.
What is the vacancy? You said 4%?
It's less than 4% for
For
residential.
residential.
That's
That's
it?
for office, it's high.
That's a good percentage. That's full occupancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, New York is 1%, San Francisco is
The
not.
problem is the $21. That's the problem.
For the office space. Because you're not hitting 21
See,
in
what
residential.
that means is the $21 is really what it is in Southfield. That's what, and you build that same space in New York, and even in this market in New York, it's $65, $70,
Yeah.
depending on the size. It could be $50, but that's it. And the costs are basically the same. Land as much as many, many more times.
In New York, yeah.
I was going to add that we looked at commercial as a signature building on the site, and the site's not really conducive to a signature office building because typically when you have a signature office building, you have it in a really prominent location. The copyright building's directly on campus marches, and I mean, if I were a Quicken, I would capture either the Broderick Tower or the Whitney building on the other side of the street and realize
Are the
40% in tax credits you can get in historic preservation tax credits on
Are the foundations adequate
for.
to carry a 33-story building?
It's,
Anybody check
we're
that?
not structural engineers, but
Anyone check that?
They had their structural
It was a,
engineer look at
yeah.
It said mid-rise office.
Because the piers were there, I know. The
piers are
piers are
sticking up.
above.
By the way, we've run across our time. Great presentation. By the way, I know we all appreciate you all using terms like 100% location and threshold resistance in your presentation. Thank you all.
Let me just take 10 seconds. I thought it was very analytical. I thought you reached the right conclusions, and you were willing to say that education won't work, and you gave the facts because you did the studies. I think you're right on in residential. I think, as Mr. Collins says, it's a matter of timing, and somebody's going to want to land bank this, but you acknowledge the trends in your studies with respect to office worker growth and residential growth, so I think you were spot on.
Thank you.
Very good.